Hello everyone, welcome to Cloud Tech Coaching. Today we'll be discussing about normalization. In that we already discussed about first normalization, and today we are going to discuss about second normalization, that is second normal form. It is also called as 2NF. So before we learn about second normal form, we need to understand the following. Prime attribute, an attribute which is a part of the candidate key, is known as prime attribute. So any attribute which is a candidate key, then it is known as prime attribute. So we'll now know what is candidate key. The minimal set of attribute which can uniquely identify a tuple. That means any attribute which can uniquely identify, that means which identify a tuple. That tuple means the complete row. If attribute which is meant to identify any tuple is known as candidate key. So for this we can give example, that is student number and student phone both are candidate keys for relation student. That means just consider there is a relation named student, and student number and student phone number can be served as candidate key. That means student number cannot be repeated. That means it serves as a unique key for the student relation. So this is about candidate key. Then coming to non-prime attributes, an attribute which is not a part of prime key. That means if any attribute which is not a prime key attribute, then it is said to be non-prime attribute. Now we will see the rules of second normalization. To achieve second normalization, the relation should be in first normal form. This is the first rules of second normalization. So next we will see the second rules of 2NF, that is every non-prime attribute should be fully functionally dependent on prime key attributes. So this is the second rules of 2NF, that is any attribute which is non-prime that should be dependent on prime attribute. This fully functionally means, just think if there is two prime attributes in a relation and the remaining all the non-prime attributes should be dependent on both the prime attributes. It should not depend on any one of the prime key attribute. This is the meaning of fully functionally dependent on prime attributes. So we'll see the example such that you can understand easily. Just think we have table name student project. I'll write the attributes now. Student ID, project ID, student name, project name. So we'll consider these as attributes: student ID, project ID, student name and project name. So here student ID is related to student name and project ID is related to project name. That is, these are the prime attributes. So this is ID and this is ID. So it will be not repeated for each one of the non-prime attributes. So these both are prime attributes. Here student name is a non-prime attribute which is dependent on student ID, and project name is a non-prime attribute which is dependent on project ID. But according to rule, Non-prime key attributes must be dependent on both prime key attributes and not on any one of the prime key attributes individually. See here, project name is dependent on project ID, but project name is not dependent on student ID. So this is called as partial dependency. So partial dependency is not allowed in 2NF. So partial dependency is not allowed in 2NF. So to overcome this, so we have to divide the table into two table, or we can say that we can split this one table into two individual tables. Here we are going to divide the student project table into student table and project table. The attributes will be student ID, student name and project ID. And in project table the attributes will be project ID and project name. So here the student name is a non-prime attribute which is dependent on both student ID as well as project ID, and in project table project name is a non-prime attribute which is dependent on project ID. Here we have achieved second normalization where there is no partial dependency. There is no partial dependency here, as well as we have achieved the rules of second normal form, that is every non-prime attribute should be fully functionally dependent on prime key attributes. So this is all about second normalization form. Thank you for watching.